Oh, Rick! Rick just got fucking decimated. Here, I get on one truck, you get on the other. No!
Wait, no way.
Oh my god! Is it me or is it just feels a bit colder in here for some reason? Uh-oh. So yeah, that's that's the interesting thing about the Cold War. It just happened, and I think the powers that be saw it coming and thus made the right preparations for you know, basically World War III. Wasn't sure when it was going to break out, but they were prepared otherwise. Yeah, history class was very, very interesting whenever it brought up the Cold War because I remember my history teacher telling us about what happened with you know, the Cold War, you know, the sides of you know, capitalism versus communism, free market versus state run, and in all honesty, it put a lot of things into perspective for me. It put a lot of things of just like, you know, how fortunate, you know, I am to have grown up in the country that I live in. I mean, and beyond, like, and for the most part, I'm not going to say my life's been perfect, but by no means has my life been, like, impossibly hard. Like, I have people who cared about me. I have, like, family who cared about me. I had very caring and endearing mother who, yeah, that's the thing. My mom, we actually found out very bad news that they're going to have to basically cut her back open and redo her knee surgery, and the recovery is going to be basically 3 months. Yeah, it's what we did not want to hear. It's basically, you know, the worst, like one of the worst case scenarios. I mean, the absolute worst case scenario is that her leg gets infected so bad that they have to cut it off, which I'm glad it's not that, but at the same time, it's just this whole scenario has just made me, it's just made me thankful that for my mother, and thankful that she's been such a very pivotal part of my life, and also the fact that she's always been there for me. And yeah, I'm sorry if I'm gushing, guys, or if I sound like a broken record. I just can't stress enough that how much of an impact my mom has had on my life. And it sucks that I feel that, you know, I feel this way. Yeah, it sucks that, you know, I feel this way, and I'm bogging down the video by talking about it, but you know, I feel like I have to at this point. I mean, if I don't, I'm gonna just go crazy. But yeah, I'm down here watching more Oversimplified, and I'm actually continuing on what a lot of people wanted me to. I did World War II by myself, and then I did the little mini wars thing with Quinn, which Quinn enjoyed, and actually I turned Quinn on to Oversimplified, and now Quinn, I think, is going to be watching Oversimplified's videos, which I think is really, really cool. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Oversimplified is going to bring to the table with the Cold War. So let's go ahead and get into it. This is Oversimplified, part 1 of the Cold War. Here we go.
I've decided that in order to sell more merch, I should do a face reveal wearing some of it. So are you ready? Here we go. Boom. New Minimalist and Cold War merch available now. And
Very
get
nice.
the new limited edition Churchill character pin before it sells out. With more characters coming
Winston
in the future.
Churchill.
Link in the description down below. The year is 1917. Fighting rages on the Eastern Front of the First World War. Both Germany and Russia are on the brink of collapse. Soldier, I need you to bring me this man. Got it. Found him, sir. What?
I get the
not
joke.
Lenin.
Lenin.
The Russian communist. What? Why would I need a beetle? Lenin, the Russian communist.
You're out of your depth. Shut the fuck up, Donnie. You're out of your depth. Sorry, Big Lebowski reference. For any of you out there who get that reference, thank you.
He was exiled to Switzerland. You know what? I'll do it myself.
Capitalism by Karl Marx.
Who wants to start a revolution?
Oh, here we go. Ah, yes. All the statues of Lenin in his honor, and then after the wall fell down, it was just like everyone couldn't topple those statues over quick
sent
enough.
him all the way back to Russia, hoping he and his mates would create an internal crisis. And create an internal crisis they did. The government was overthrown, and Lenin was in charge. He immediately pulled out of the First World War, made the country communist, started a 3-year-long civil war, got shot, broke the economy, caused a famine, and then he died. On his deathbed he said, "Hey man, tell whoever's in charge of giving people jobs not to let that jerk Stalin become the next leader. By the way, who did I put in charge of giving people jobs?"
He wanted Trotsky to really be the one to carry on, in which, from what a lot of people said, Trotsky was a lot more of a moderate communist compared to Stalin. Stalin, by all accounts and purposes, was a literal psychopath. He literally had no care of anyone else, and he basically was power hungry and wanted everyone to know that he was in charge. And if you didn't accept that he was in charge, he would not only kill you, he would send out the KGB, and they would literally would kill your family in front of you, and then, as an eternal mercy to you, if they didn't put a bullet in your head, they'd make you work in the gulag for 30 years. You know, go to ship your ass to Siberia and work in the mines out there for, you know, God knows how long, until you die. Let's just put it that way. You work there until you die.
That would be Stalin, sir.
Oh, yeah. General Secretary. He made Stalin General Secretary, so yeah. That's just how it goes, man. You make the man who you don't want to be in charge, you make him in charge of, you know, handing out all the jobs, and he's going to make himself the next leader.
By the way, who did I put in charge of giving people jobs? That would be Stalin, sir. Stalin was a rising force in the Communist Party. He still had some opponents, but conveniently, all of them were arrested or disappeared. So that was lucky. And so Stalin took over. He implemented his 5-year plans, which transformed the country from an agriculture-based economy to an industrial one. And like Lenin before him, he reigned with terror. Anyone who dared criticize or oppose him would either be killed or left to rot in the horrendous Soviet.
And when I say moderate communist, that doesn't mean that that Lenin was any better. Lenin was a very, very, very like ardently staunch, if you don't do what I say, I will kill you kind of person. Stalin, if by comparison, if Stalin is a 10 on the asshole-meter, I would put Lenin at about a 7. Yeah, 7.5. Still an asshole. I mean, still killed a lot of people, and honestly didn't know how to fucking run a country, but since when do world leaders ever know anything about running a damn country?
Work camps. Then a short man with a silly mustache tried to take over the world, punched the Russians all the way to Moscow, and then the Russians, with some help from their faithful ally, the Winter, punched them all the way back to Berlin. At this point, being allies, America, the UK, and the Soviet Union were good chums. They held a couple of conferences near the end of the war to decide what would happen next. Hey Stalin, after all your trials and tribulation, you must be pretty happy to be standing here in Berlin. Tsar Alexander made it all the way to Paris. Just give me a second. Hey man, I think something's up with Stalin. I know, right? What should we do? Shall I tell him about the bomb? Yeah, tell him about the bomb. That will scare him. So, we got this crazy new big A-bomb that can destroy an entire city in one go. Yes, my spies told me already. Oh wait, I meant to act surprised. Wow, that's amazing. He already knew. How? Am I sure I want to send nuclear secrets via unsecure public coffee shop Wi-Fi? Am I ever? Dude, use a VPN. And speaking of VPNs,
there we go. Sponsor.
If, like me, you take internet safety seriously, then you need
NordVPN.
NordVPN hides your online activities from outside intruders, preventing anyone from stealing your personal data and stopping your service providers selling your data to advertisers.
So.
With over 5,000 servers in 62 countries, it allows you to surf the net anonymously
I use
and securely.
ExpressVPN
And it's simple to use. With just the click of a button, you can connect.
Not that there's anything against NordVPN. A lot of people I know use Nord and
to a server halfway across the world, even allowing you to access streaming services from that specific territory. Say, for example, you wanted to watch a certain oversimplified video that for some reason has been blocked in your country. With NordVPN, you can. It works seamlessly across PC, mobile, and tablet. Go to nordvpn.com/oversimplified to get an amazing 75% off. That's just $2.99 per month with an additional month free for a limited time. So again, that's nordvpn.com/oversimplified, also in the description box down below. Now where were we? Oh yeah. Does the A stand for atomic or ass? Then America dropped their big A-bomb on Japan, and World War II officially came to an end. Hooray, we won! Okay, so now it's time to establish the New World Order. Stalin, you're in charge of Eastern Europe. Now, we want you to let them all hold elections. Oh yes, of course, elections. And these elections will be free and fair, right? Oh yes,
no,
certainly.
they won't.
Free and fair. Definitely free and fair. Communist, 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 communist. If that's not free and fair, I don't know what is.
Basically, twisting the arm of the Eastern Bloc to sign the Warsaw Pact. Yeah, that was... God, again, world politics, y'all. It ain't fun.
Soviet puppet governments were established as a buffer zone between the USSR and the West, with Churchill proclaiming an Iron Curtain had descended across the continent. The relationship between the old allies was deteriorating fast. Over the next few years, the British intervened in the Greek Civil War to prevent a communist takeover. In Turkey, the Russians began demanding more control of Turkey's sea access routes, which prompted the US to send their largest battleship to Turkey for a friendly visit. After World War II, Iran was now occupied by both the Soviets and the British, with an agreement to both pull out once the war was over. The British pulled out. Stalin was like, you know what? I think I might stick around. All in favor of kicking Russia out of Iran?
Yeah, the UN kicked them out. And basically, Stalin was
you
like...
want to know something? You guys suck. Pressure from the UN forced the Soviets to leave.
Not entirely how it went, but
NATO,
yeah.
The Soviets had no doubt that the West was out to encircle and destroy them. And America announced the Truman Doctrine, in which they basically said, those guys are not cool, cannot be trusted, and we will do everything we can to prevent the spread of communism around the world. Many view this moment as the official declaration of the Cold War. Back in Europe, everyone was living in a post-apocalyptic void brought on by the Second World War. Cities reduced to rubble, not enough food. It was terrible. This is great. The more they suffer, the more likely it is they'll turn to communism.
That's fucked up.
You're really messed up. What's wrong with you? My father used to punish me severely. America realized what was going on and quickly made a move. Under the Marshall Plan, they sent $12 billion to Western Europe for economic recovery.
Basically, America was just like, oh, hey, you know, we sold a lot of weapons to you guys, and we got really rich off that. You know what? There you go. Rebuild your cities, rebuild everything, you know, do good. You know, and it worked. I mean, a lot of countries flourished under the Marshall Plan.
The countries of Stalin's Eastern Bloc looked on with envy. Hey, Czechoslovakia, you want to come get some economic aid? Yeah, but I have to check with my mom first.
Sorry, it ain't happening.
Sorry, America. I can't come. This was a full-on economic battle raging between capitalism and communism in Europe. If the Western nations developed faster and better than the East, that would be a defeat for Stalin. So he set up his own rival economic recovery plan, which he called Comecon, and he also set up Common Form, which gave him more political control over the Eastern Bloc. But nowhere did this economic battle rage harder than in the city of Berlin. Caught over 100 miles behind Soviet lines, the city had been divided up between the Allies, and the Western segments were still under Western control. East Berliners could travel freely to West Berlin, see the economic prosperity and think, maybe this communism thing ain't so great after all. I'm gonna have fun tonight. You're home late. Oh, Stalin, I was just out with my friends. Friends? You stink of capitalism! You're out engaging in imperialist debauchery again! I swear, Ivan, I can't keep doing this. Stalin saying imperialist to like other countries. That's hilarious. That's imperialist. Now, don't mind me as I take over all these other puppet states. The West out. So he said, hey, guess what? I'm blockading all of your supply routes to West Berlin. What are you going to do about it? I suppose we'll just fly the supplies in.
A lot of planes, but it did the job.
All right, Truman, you win this round. The Berlin airlift was an incredible undertaking and a major
Yeah.
success for the Western
Ton
Allies,
of
and
flights.
Stalin ended his blockade of West Berlin. His aggressive actions worried the West, but not as much as this did.
Yep.
The Soviet Union had developed their very own atomic bomb. The USA no longer had a nuclear monopoly. The world now knew that if a major war broke out between the two superpowers, it would be more destructive than anyone could imagine.
Yeah,
so
just-
it was comforting when Stalin came out and said that war between the Soviet Union and the West was unlikely. Oh, wait, inevitable.
Yeah, inevitable,
He said
yeah.
it was inevitable. Hey, you know who I haven't checked in on in a...
You know who else said that? You know who, Kim Jong-il. He said that too. He said that he would take out America before he. Also, I love in this little animatic here. You know, you got the United States. Florida is literally America's dick. I can't unsee it now, and now you all can't unsee it. Sorry, but yeah, I noticed it. And I'm just like, oh god, what has happened?
In a while, my good friend China. Whoa, what happened to you? What happened to them was a full-blown civil war that had been
Kuomintang.
going on since 1927.
Yeah, the Kuomintang
People's Liberation
was thrown
Army,
out.
under the leadership of Mao Zedong, successfully defeated the Republic of China, who fled to Taiwan. The now communist
Yeah.
China and the Soviet Union signed a mutual defense treaty. This was terrible news for the West. But wait, there's more. After the Second World War, Korea was divided along the 38th parallel. In the north, the Soviets set up a communist regime. In the south, America set up an anti-communist regime. Both were led by very sweet-looking old men, but don't let that deceive you.
They were
were
both-
both ruthless dictators,
Yeah,
and both
neither
dreamed
man
of reuniting.
Neither man was good. That's the thing. But it's because this side over here, they said, "Oh, we support communism," and this one said, "Oh, we support capitalism." America supports this one, Russia supports this one, but neither of them were good men. Both of them sucked. Criminy.
Korea under their own regime. Now that he had the bomb, Stalin was feeling a little more cocky, and he finally gave Kim permission to attack. The North launched a surprise invasion of the
Kim
South
Il-sung.
on June 25th, 1950. With Soviet aid, the North Koreans steamrolled through, taking Seoul in just 3 days and replacing one ruthless dictator with another. The UN were freaking out and quickly created an emergency force made up of troops from 16 countries to defend the South. The West still
Saw
held
that
the South
little
and
bit.
made landings at Incheon near Seoul. They pushed the North Koreans out of Seoul, replacing the ruthless dictator that had replaced the first ruthless dictator with the same ruthless dictator that had previously been replaced by the new ruthless dictator. And the
Oy.
West then continued all the way up the Korean Peninsula. At this point, China was getting worried that the UN may just keep going. The US had sent this guy to lead the operation. After winning the Pacific Theater of World War
yeah.
II, General
I
Douglas
remember
MacArthur's
this.
head was big and his balls were bigger. He reassured President Truman that there was absolutely no way at all that the Chinese would ever get involved.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
about that,
500,000
Doug.
Chinese troops were crossing into Korea. Nuke 'em. No.
Yeah, Truman wanted to just like deep fry him. He wanted to just like eradicate them, just like let them know, yeah, we're in charge. But Truman's like, you do realize that the Russians have the bomb too, right? And Truman's like, I don't care. Again, MacArthur was a megalomaniac. Like, you talk about cult of personality, that man thought he was God. He literally did. He literally thought he was God. I remembered that. I remember hearing a funny story. My history teacher, Dr. Garland, Garland taught me, was that Truman and MacArthur did not like each other for the longest time, and they were both both of their planes were flying in, and MacArthur refused to land first. He wanted Truman to land before him because it was tradition that the last person to land was the president or the man in power. And Truman, or not Truman, but MacArthur, thinking, I'm 5-star, I'm 5-star Admiral, Douglas MacArthur. I rule the Pacific. I'm gonna land last. They threatened to shoot down MacArthur's plane. MacArthur laughed, and then he said, all right, he does got balls. It's basically the gist of it. He's like, I guess this president does have balls. All right, go ahead and land the plane. Then he lands, and then Truman lands, and Truman was just like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? And that's also the other thing as well. Whenever he would fly in somewhere, he would make them announce over the loudspeaker on the airbase. It would literally be like, God has landed. Repeat, God has landed. That's the kind of dude you're dealing with when it comes to Doug MacArthur. The dude was hands down one of the strangest cats throughout history, man.
Nuke 'em! No! Ah, come on! You're fired. The US considered the nuclear option, but now that the Soviets also had the bomb, they didn't want to risk all-out global destruction. The communists pushed the West right back almost to the exact same spot they had all started from, and they ended up in a stalemate, where they remained until both sides finally agreed to work towards a peace settlement in 2018. Back in America, Americans decided they wanted a new president who would be tough on communism, so they elected famed World War II General Eisenhower.
What's up, Ike?
It was really hard to draw. It's 1953. Hey, Stalin, how you doing? Oh, he's dead. He had a cerebral hemorrhage, and his reign of terror kind of came back to bite him in the ass. Because
for anyone who wants to see a fully honestly, I looked up how accurate the film was. The Death of Stalin is actually extremely accurate. And it's also very, very funny because it has all these amazingly talented actors. It has, actors from Monty Python. It's got Steve Buscemi. It's got so many great actors take part in this. And also seeing Jason Isaacs as Admiral Zhukov is one of the best things ever. It's just he's like, I'm gonna have to report this. Like, threatening to harm a member of the pursuers. Look at your fucking face. I love Jason Isaacs as Zhukov. He's probably my favorite part of the film. But Death of Stalin is a great film that goes over the death of Stalin. That's actually really accurate and is actually very, very funny. And actually kind of terrifying whenever you see, the people in charge and how barbaric they revert to whenever power struggles happen.
Because he had imprisoned all of his best doctors, and those that were left were too terrified to treat him.
Also, a lot of the best doctors that he imprisoned and exiled or killed were all Jewish. Yeah, that's the other thing. Hitler hated the Jews. Stalin hated the Jews almost as bad.
New leader, Nikita Khrushchev, called a meeting and said, "Hey
Nicky.
guys, you know how Stalin was imprisoning and murdering us all for doing basically nothing? Yeah, he was kind of a jerk. I'm really not sure how this is news to you."
I just imagine Hannibal Buress just being like, what y'all booing for? I'm right.
Khrushchev went on a campaign of de-Stalinization. Statues of Stalin were taken down, Stalingrad was renamed, and Khrushchev announced that he wanted the Soviet people to be happy and would allow greater freedom in the Soviet Union. So how did that work out? Well, an uprising in East Germany was brutally suppressed, a revolution in Hungary was brutally suppressed, and demonstrations in Poland were brutally suppressed. Although he did finally allow some mild reforms. Back in the Soviet Union, he permitted more cultural expression, but then began banning stuff based on his own personal taste. Modern art looks like a child urinated on a canvas. Banned. Jazz music sounds like the feeling of needing to fart. Banned. Your poetry is really depressing. How could anyone in the Soviet Union be depressed? You're banned. Khrushchev wanted the Soviet people to be happy, but not like that, or that, or that. Young people began enjoying a foreign Western pop culture. Son, remove that disgusting imperialist apparel at once. Shut up, Dad. You can't tell me what to do. Well, would you look at that? Turns out he can tell me what to do. The West had initially liked the cut of Khrushchev's jib, but world events soon soured relations even more. The two sides were spying on each other a whole lot throughout the Cold War. The KGB had spies and informants in nearly every aspect of Western life and government. So much so that whenever the US tried to send spies into the Soviet Union, the KGB were usually ready to arrest them on the spot. Members of the Manhattan Project aided the Soviet Union in acquiring the bomb. Some American officials believed they were on the wrong side. I'll sell you 3 secrets for $5 million. Okay. Go ahead. The Allies are digging a tunnel under East Berlin to tap your communications. There's an American agent living at this address in Moscow, and sometimes, when I'm home alone, I like to put on my wife's dresses, sit in the corner, and cry for hours.
Okay. Also, here's the thing. A lot of people still lived with the ideal that communism was the future, in which, there's people out there who still believe that, in which I've come across people who have good arguments, but at the same time, it's just like me being a student of history. I see the history of communism, and I'm sorry, it's never really fully worked.
Very interesting. In America, fear took hold during the Red
McCarthyism.
Scare and the
Oh my
McCarthy
God.
trials. American values imploded as fear of
Doug,
communism
yeah.
collided with freedom of thought and expression, and
Joe
communist kind of
McCarthy.
became a buzzword thrown around to describe anything people didn't like. Hollywood? Communist. Your next door neighbor's dog?
Communist.
When the grocery store cashier asks if you need a bag when you clearly can't carry 10 tubs of baconaise in your hands, Communist. But one area in particular where the US had an edge over the Soviet Union was in its espionage technology. In particular, U-2 spy planes flew across Russia carrying out surveillance from the
I'm sorry.
espionage
I gotta
technology.
do this.
In particular,
I gotta do this. And I still haven't found what I'm looking for.
carrying out surveillance from the
I'm
skies.
sorry.
There was a nasty incident in 1960 though, when one was shot down and Khrushchev
yeah.
was furious. Who the hell is this? He's a high-altitude weather enthusiast who flew off course. Okay, that sounds plausible. Wait a minute. Why does he have a gun and a poison needle? Because he's a very naughty high-altitude weather enthusiast. But much to America's concern, the Soviet Union appeared to be ahead in the space race.
He was also
Everyone
from
freaked
Pound,
out when
Virginia,
Russia
the guy
launched
that got
the world's
shot
first
down.
satellite, and then they actually sent a man into space. Even worse, there also
Yeah.
appeared to be a missile gap in the Soviets' favor, and Khrushchev was so confident that he even allowed the US to set up a technology exhibit in Moscow, attended by a certain Vice President Richard Nixon. Check this out. We have color TV. Yes, but we've been to space and can obliterate you with our massive nuclear arsenal. Check out this vegetable peeler. Tensions increased further when both sides upgraded their atomic bombs to hydrogen bombs.
yeah.
And after West Germany was allowed to join
H-bombs
NATO in
and the
1955, Khrushchev set up the Defensive Warsaw Pact, strengthening the military ties between the Soviet Union
Yeah,
and its
basically,
satellite
yeah, the
states.
Warsaw
In
Pact,
1960,
yeah.
Americans decided they wanted a new president who would be tough on communism, so they elected John F. Kennedy. The Soviet Union was advancing its technology, but it was also bleeding its coffers dry, and all of the money was going towards the military, not the people. Life under communism was still as hard as ever, and Berlin remained a thorn in the Soviet side. The contrast between the economically prosperous West and the struggling East was clearer day by day, and East Berliners were still able to freely travel to the West. Now, many of them were deciding to stay there. Millions defected to West Germany via West Berlin, causing Eastern factories to lose workers and taking a heavy toll on the economy. Soviet leaders decided this couldn't continue any longer.
And
First,
built a
Khrushchev
wall.
tried this: leave West Berlin, or else. Or else what? Or else I'll be really mad at you. Yeah, no, we're gonna stay. Listen, man, West Berlin is ours, East Berlin is yours. That's just how it is. Kennedy felt pretty good about his show of American resolve. But wait a second, did you catch that? Let's replay it.
East Berlin is yours.
Uh-oh, Kennedy just told Khrushchev that the USA wouldn't interfere in what the Soviets did with their section of Berlin, so Khrushchev came up with a new idea. We're gonna build a wall, and it's gonna be a big, beautiful wall, and it's gonna keep out all the Mexicans. No, that's wrong, it's gonna keep in these Berliners. Oh, sorry, it's gonna keep in all the Mexicans. On August 13th,
And they're gonna pay for it.
1961, Berliners woke up to find their city divided into two, with barbed wire and guards blocking the border between East and West. Over time, a wall was constructed throughout the city. Families were torn apart. Thousands would risk their lives escaping over the wall, and hundreds would die trying. To the despair of Berliners, the West were unable to do anything about it. But the wall did put on full display the failure of the communist system. As Kennedy said, democracy is not perfect, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in. As part of the agreement
Burn.
between the two sides, US diplomats were still allowed to travel to East Berlin. But suddenly, East Berlin crossing guards started giving them the business, and Kennedy was like, nah-uh. In October, the US rolled tanks up to the crossing point at Checkpoint Charlie as a show of strength. The Soviets did the same, and the two were in a standoff. They stayed like that for 16 hours, and the world braced for nuclear Armageddon. Thankfully though, Kennedy called Khrushchev directly and was like, hey man, this is getting way too hot. How about you back your tanks up by an inch and we'll do the same? Sounds good. Okay, how about you back your tanks up by another inch and we'll follow suit? Alright, hey, you want to do another inch? And they both very slowly inched away from the apocalypse. Phew, let's hope that's the biggest crisis of my presidency. It wasn't.
There were two, actually, that were just a little bit worse than that. Oh, God. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and get part 2 queued up. So,
This
yeah.
video was
God. Basically, Berlin was a gigantic push here to start World War III button. And people have been saying, and often whenever you divide countries and, you basically annex land away and stuff like that, it's going to cause a war. I mean, I mean, Civil War, Mexican-American War, World War II, World War One. Although World War One was sort of set off by Franz Ferdinand's assassination. And then there's been several that just pop up every now and again. But mostly it's through land disputes, really. And this is no different. I mean, the Russians wanted as much control as they could, and they hated having this bastion of capitalist, a haven for capitalist behavior. And yeah, it's just again, dude. Freaking global politics. What are you gonna do? Anyway, let's start with part 2. Here we go.
This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community where you can learn just about anything. Support my channel by signing up using the link below and get your first 2 months for free. For anyone who thinks recent US history has never been as crazy as it is right now, allow me to present to you the 1960s.
Yeah.
Extreme cultural division, major political assassinations, and the closest the world has ever come to nuclear apocalypse. Shocked by the CIA's intrusive methods for putting down socialism in Latin America, a certain Fidel Castro met with a certain Che Guevara in a bar in Mexico City, and the two of them decided they should grow some awesome beards and overthrow the Cuban government, which is exactly what they did. Cuba had been America's summer playground, and America didn't like seeing a communist regime being set up in its own backyard. So the US immediately began training up Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro. However, as the day of the operation came closer, Kennedy wanted to conceal any US involvement in the plan. So he massively scaled back American air support, and as a result, the Bay of Pigs invasion was a humiliating defeat for America. But Castro felt there was still an impending US threat to his regime. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Khrushchev had a lot of medium-range nuclear missiles that couldn't reach America, but they could if they were positioned, say, on an exotic Caribbean island off the coast of Florida. Hey, I'm a communist who hates America. You're a communist who hates America. You know what that means? We should fall in love. I was just gonna suggest you set your missiles up in Cuba. Oh, no, you're right. That's a better idea. Be still, my beating heart. On October 14th, 1962, a U-2 spy plane over Cuba noticed something strange. Sir, you need to look at this photograph. You're right. That's the cutest dog I've ever seen.
Aww.
Sir, I was referring more to the Soviet missiles. America freaked out as they realized what was going on. They were completely vulnerable, and they had to act fast. They knew that airstrikes or an invasion of Cuba would likely mean nuclear war with the Soviet Union. So Kennedy came up with another idea. A blockade. The US Navy announced it would stop and search any Soviet ships heading to Cuba, and would sink any that did not comply. In response, the Soviet put its military into full combat readiness. The US did the same, and began drawing up plans for an attack on Cuba. Things were escalating fast, and both superpowers were getting ready for World War III. Emergency communications between the two sides broke down as Khrushchev rejected Kennedy's demands for the missiles to be removed. And for the first time in history, US Strategic Air Command moved to DEFCON 2. DEFCON 1 means nuclear war. The Soviets shot down a U-2 spy plane over Cuba. A Soviet nuclear submarine in the Caribbean mistakenly believed war had already broken out, and two of the senior officers gave the go-ahead to fire its nuclear torpedo. Thankfully, the third senior officer, this beautiful man, refused to authorize the decision.
Damn.
The US finalized.
So say.
Thankfully, the third senior officer, this beautiful man.
Look at that photogenic motherfucker. Look at him. That's a Russian movie star right there, man. Vasily Arkhipov. Damn. You saved the world, my dude. Good job.
Refused to authorize the decision. The US finalized its preparations, and I kid you not, the day before the US were set to decide the day and time for the Cuban invasion, Khrushchev was like, hey, you know if you just removed your missiles from Turkey, we'd remove ours from Cuba? Yeah, that sounds good to me. It was
Jupiter
a bit more
missiles.
complicated than that, but at the last second, the two sides finally came to an agreement. Soviet missiles were shipped out of Cuba, and the world breathed one gigantic sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Except for one guy, who was bloody livid.
Oh,
Phew.
yeah.
Let's hope that's the biggest crisis of my presidency. Unfortunately for him, his
It was
presidency
not.
was to end with one. Having nearly blown up the
Dang.
planet, a few changes were made. First, the superpowers agreed to a limited test ban treaty. Secondly, the Soviets ousted Khrushchev and replaced him with Leonid Brezhnev, who was a kisser. He liked to kiss. Both sides were deeply concerned at the prospect of nuclear war, but still, the arms race raged on throughout the 60s and 70s. US intelligence worked out that the Soviets' nuclear arsenal was not as powerful as they previously thought, but in fact, it was America that held the advantage. ABMs and MIRVs were developed, and the doctrine of MAD. If both sides knew they would be completely destroyed by a nuclear war, neither would risk starting one. But even without war, the world was already feeling the effects of nuclear weapons. In 1966, above the pleasant town of Palomares in Spain, a US bomber bomber collided with a tanker mid-air, and 4 hydrogen bombs fell and landed near the town below. It hasn't exploded, so I'm sure everything...
The radiation that leaked from those, oh, Jesus.
Everything's fine. Whoa, boy. Hey, I wouldn't eat that if I were you. Okay. What were you gonna do today? Go for a swim? Yeah, I wouldn't. Are you breathing right now? Yeah? Yeah, I wouldn't. It took the Americans 2.5 months to find one of the bombs, which had gone missing in the ocean. This was the 14th time America had lost a nuclear bomb since 1950. Nobody knows how many bombs the Soviet Union lost. So sleep well tonight.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's the thing. There's still missiles unaccounted for out there. And the fact that we haven't had an incident where one of them has been used to destroy a city or anything like that is a miracle.
After Kennedy's assassination, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over, and he inherited a developing crisis in the East, Vietnam. Back in the 50s, the Vietnamese had kicked their French colonizers out once and for all, and the country was divided into two. In the north, a communist regime, and in the south, an anti-communist regime. Both were led by very sweet-looking old men, but don't let that deceive you. They were both ruthless dictators, and both dreamed of reuniting Vietnam under their own regime.
Here
so
we
the
go
North
again.
established the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong, to carry out a campaign of guerrilla warfare in the south with Soviet support. The US sent advisors to help train the South Vietnamese to deal with the threat, but President Diem's brutal policies pushed more and more South Vietnamese to support the Viet Cong, and over the next decade, the situation escalated to a breaking point. America feared the domino effect. That is, if South Vietnam fell to communism, would Cambodia be next? Then Laos? Thailand? Burma? India?
And you see, that's the problem with the Truman Doctrine. It assumes that all countries will just fall, domino effect into communism. That's not how it works. I mean, yeah, again, paranoia, fear, all that crap. It just blows up out of control.
LBJ had to make a choice between losing South Vietnam or sending in the troops, and so
lose South Vietnam. I mean, Diem's policies were absolutely asinine, and that's the reason why so many defected to the north is because of his cruelty. And don't get me wrong, Ho Chi Minh was just as bad, but at least it's just, Also, America's strategy during Vietnam was, we'll fight a war of attrition, and then they'll give up. No, they won't. Because here's the thing, American resolve to fight in a foreign war 10,000 miles away against, a country who they don't even really know why they're fighting, resolve for that will not last as long as I am fighting for my country and I'm fighting for my future. Yeah, again, if America would have fought an objective-based war, would have taken Ho Chi Minh City, would have taken the North, and all that, I think America could have won Vietnam. I mean, we had the resources for it, but the problem is we just didn't have the game plan. Instead, hey, we'll fight a war of attrition, and then they'll give up. Nope. Again, just thanks, Lyndon Johnson.
From 1965, America found itself in a war unlike anything it had ever fought before. Let's play Spot the Viet Cong Soldier. Did you see him? Of course not. That's because millions of young American men were drafted and sent to fight a ruthless enemy who used the thick jungle as its shield. It was nearly impossible to tell where the enemy was, or worse, who it was. And as a result, the civilian population got caught up in the brutal crossfire. The city of Saigon found itself under regular attack, and America launched a bombing campaign in the north during Operation Rolling Thunder. The Viet Cong used the Ho Chi Minh Trail running through Laos and Cambodia to supply the campaign. It was a long and brutal war, and I could never do it justice in this video. But in terms of the Cold War, Vietnam was probably the biggest of many global conflicts that signaled a turning point. Under the threat of nuclear war, the two superpowers began working to make their relationship more constructive, and as a result, their ideological battle shifted away from the potential of direct conflict and more towards attempting to influence smaller proxy wars around the world. In the Middle East, the Soviet Union provided aid against Israel during the Six-Day War, and then again when the US backed Israel during the Yom Kippur War. In Africa, the Angolan Civil War saw US-supported South Africans fighting Soviet-supported Cubans. In the conflict between Somalia and Ethiopia, the superpowers interestingly switched sides, as regimes changed, and the US continued fighting the spread of communism in its own backyard, funding the famous Contra groups to fight the socialist junta in Nicaragua. These proxy wars were fierce enough to begin with, but superpower intervention amplified the destruction and created alarming levels of human suffering.
Again, dude, just proxy wars and, the Truman Doctrine, containment, and of course, America's guilty of that. We're guilty, like not us, our government is guilty of that. And then, of course, the Russians did the exact same thing. The Russians committed horrible, horrible acts of violence against other countries. I mean, hell, you talk about like America and Vietnam, the Soviets in Afghanistan. Ooh, Afghanistan is Russia's Vietnam, or is Soviet Union's Vietnam. Yeah, that's... Dude. Anyway, sorry.
Throughout the Third World, and in Vietnam, that human suffering was all being broadcast back home via good old television. Going into the late 60s, America was a changing nation. This became this. This became this. And this became this. The new slogan that was taking root: make love, not war. The majority of Americans did not approve of Johnson's handling of the Vietnam War, and in 1968, a silent majority elected law and order candidate Richard Nixon. As the Vietnam War appeared to be increasingly unwinnable, and public opinion turning increasingly sour, Nixon made the decision to begin bringing the troops home, and ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam by 1973.
2 years
later. 2 years later, the South fell. The Cold War was now taking its toll on both superpowers. In Russia, a huge percentage of the budget was still going to the military. People were still hungry, and they just didn't have access to the same lifestyle and goods as the West. And what did they have to show for it? They weren't even winning the space race anymore. Both sides needed to reduce spending in order to rescue their economies, and so both welcomed with open arms an easing of hostilities, otherwise known as détente. To improve relations, Nixon became the first U.S. president to visit Moscow in 1972, and Brezhnev returned the gesture a year later. A number of treaties were signed, including the 1972 SALT Agreement that limited nuclear weapons. Relations with China were even improved by a ping-pong diplomacy when the U.S. table tennis team went on a tour of the People's Republic. However, internally, China was still pushing anti-capitalist propaganda, which led to some mixed messages. Nixon even visited China in 1972, and it was a barrel of laughs.
Today, the president walks among priceless treasures from China's golden age. Among them, a pair of ear stoppers used by the emperor to keep from hearing criticism.
You put the stopper into his ears so that he couldn't hear the criticism.
Give me a pair of them.
Nixon could be funny. That's the thing. Nixon could be funny. It's just he was so paranoid about losing and so paranoid about the people that he trusted. I mean, that's the one thing about Nixon I will give credit for. The man was funny. He could make people laugh. I would say he's probably the funniest president. Him and like legit funny. Him and Reagan. After Reagan got shot, I remember reading about that. After Reagan got shot, I saw the video of it. I think my dad showed it to me. After Reagan got shot, he gave a speech not too long later, and he was giving this speech, and in the middle of his speech, a balloon popped in the back of the auditorium, and it was loud. It sounded like a gunshot. It was like he was making the speech. He's just like, and upon all things, I just want to say, missed me. You see, I like that.
Everything was going great for Nixon, until it was uncovered that back home he was being a very naughty boy and violating constitutional protocol. I'm announcing today my resignation as president, and I'm passing the office to my vice president, Gerald Ford. Wow, you mean in America the people can actually remove their leader when he breaks the law? Why not just rule by force? Where's the corruption? And my first act as president is to pardon Nixon.
There it is.
There it is. After the whole fiasco, Americans decided what they really wanted was just a nice, safe guy who wouldn't cheat on them. So they elected Jimmy Carter, and the two sides met in Vienna, where they signed yet another strategic arms limitation treaty. It's an honor, Premier Brezhnev. Likewise, President Carter. Please don't do that. But that's not to say there was no longer any tension between the two sides, because there was. Heaps of it. Once again, the Soviet Union put down further attempts at reform and rebellion in the Eastern Bloc. The Euro missile crisis saw new and improved classes of intermediate-range missiles being deployed in Europe. In 1979, the Soviets thought it would be a good idea if they had their own Vietnam and invaded Afghanistan to prevent the US-sponsored Islamic insurgency. And in response to these various crises, Olympic Games were boycotted.
Yeah, the 80 Moscow
that US
Games.
policy had become too soft. And in 1980, they decided they wanted a president who would be
The
tough on communism.
the 1980 Moscow Games and the 1984 Los Angeles Games. Yeah.
So they elected Ronald Reagan, and Reagan came in guns blazing. Concerned at the
Yes, he
Soviet
did.
Union's human rights violations, he made a speech calling them an evil empire. And he also wanted to renew the arms race using technological advances in computing and lasers. He
Called
came up with
Star
the Space
Wars.
Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars, which was basically a big defensive anti-nuke shield around the country. But a lot of people thought it was a pretty dumb idea. The Soviet Union perceived this shift in rhetoric as the USA getting ready for war, and they were feeling especially threatened as their relationship with their communist ally China had broken down. Relations took a big hit in 1983 when the Soviets shot down a Korean airliner that had strayed into their airspace, and it looked like the world was going right back to mid-20th century Cold War tension. But then Brezhnev got really old and died and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and he was replaced by Mikhail Gorbachev. Coming into office in 1985, he was the real game.
The final like general secretary, your premier of the Soviet Union.
Changer. His
Damn.
philosophy differed a lot from previous Soviet leaders. He felt that the reason the Soviet system and economy was struggling was that it didn't allow the Soviet people to find satisfaction in their work, because they weren't allowed to speak freely and lived in fear. Gorbachev wanted the Soviet people to be happy, but unlike previous
Glasnost
Soviet
and
leaders,
perestroika.
he actually made the change happen. Within the first couple of years, he began the political movement for more openness and transparency, and the restructuring of the Soviet political and economic systems. And change very quickly took effect. People could criticize the government, they could enjoy Western pop culture, the media interviewed Margaret Thatcher, but most importantly, the Soviet people could now enjoy Pizza Hut. All hail to Gorbachev. He also knew that the arms race needed to end in order to rescue the Soviet economy, and a positive relationship with the West must be established. Constructive dialogue reopened and resulted in the INF Treaty, which saw all intermediate-range missiles eliminated, which was huge. Reagan's tone towards the Soviet Union began to soften, and things were looking up. But what would these reforms mean for the Eastern Bloc? For decades, the Soviets had been brutally suppressing any attempt at change. Now, would they be allowed? And that was the exact question on Hungary's lips when the Prime Minister visited Moscow. Gorbachev's response, he didn't necessarily agree with the reforms, but he wouldn't stop them either. He was prepared to let the Eastern Bloc choose its own future.
It's too big.
This
Like,
was
it's
massive,
too much.
and
You
the
have to let it
Hungarian
go.
leaders began planning free, multi-party elections. Poland followed suit and also held elections in June. The anti-Soviet party Solidarity won 99 out of 100 seats in the Senate.
Oh
But
my
not just that. In Hungary, the barbed wire border between East and West was removed. The Iron Curtain was unraveling. But not all Eastern Bloc leaders were happy. Notably, East Germany was still ruled by a hardline Stalinist, Erich Honecker, and many East Germans were still eager to get out. They had been trapped by the Berlin Wall, but now they were doing the math. If they could travel to Hungary, and Hungary's border with the West was loosening, could they now make it
Just
to the West?
travel
That summer,
to
East
Hungary
Germans
and then-
decided Hungary was the latest top holiday destination. They traveled there in droves, and using various methods,
They are
tens of
Hungary
thousands
for
crossed the
freedom.
border into Austria
I do not apologize for that horrible pun. I stand behind it, damn it.
and the West. Honecker was furious and blocked travel to Hungary, but that civil liberties train had started rolling and it wasn't stopping. Thousands more flocked to the West German embassy in Prague, where they stormed the fence around the embassy gardens and a temporary refugee camp was set up. In September, deals were struck to allow the refugees to travel west via train. Back in East Germany, the people were running on a civil liberties high, and they wanted their next hit. Dissent was growing. Over time, demonstrations turned to mass protest, with plainclothes secret police officers doing their best to put down the dissent, but it had grown well out of their control. And worse, the biggest demonstration was yet to come. We're gonna put all of this down by force, right guys? Guys?
Nope.
Unfortunately, everyone had realized what he had not. This was bigger than them, and the entire
Yep.
East German Politburo voted him out of power. On November 4th, over 500,000 East Germans took to the streets of East Berlin. For many, there was still one big target left in their sights.
The wall.
That damn wall.
Yeah.
The pressure on the East
The
German
Berlin
government was
Wall.
too great. And on November 9th, they made a bit of a chaotic announcement that the travel ban between East and West was being lifted. The change wasn't meant to take effect until the next day, and crossing guards still had orders to shoot on sight any who tried to cross. But that night, huge crowds gathered at the crossing points, and the guards were overwhelmed. In an astronomically historic moment, after decades of family separation and travel restriction, the people were allowed to pass through.
Screw it.
East
Let
and
'em
West
go.
Berliners couldn't believe it, and celebrated together throughout the night.
Berliners.
Some even climbed the wall and began to topple it. The Iron Curtain had fallen, and a year later, Germany would be reunited. Elections in Bulgaria, a peaceful revolution in Czechoslovakia, and a violent one in Romania brought to an end communist authority in the Eastern Bloc.
My history teacher, Dr. Garland, one of his proudest moments that he had was that he was there when the Berlin Wall fell. And he showed me the piece of the Berlin Wall, and he showed me pictures where you could actually see him. And to this day, it's still just... People don't know the value of freedom until it's gone. And then I think after enough time goes by and enough people realize what they've missed and what they're missing, they eventually don't ask for it back. They take it back. And I think that's something that historically it always happens. And yeah, Cold War, dude. I mean, just anyway, let's go ahead and
America
finish this
decided
up.
it would be best if it just stayed away and let the change happen, as the anti-communist movement continued all the way back to Moscow. Gorbachev had given the people the freedom to demonstrate. Now, they demonstrated for an end to the communist single-party rule, and Gorbachev had to give in. For the first time in history, elections were held in which candidates not officially endorsed by the party were allowed to run. Ambitious rival of Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin, led a growing democratic movement. Now things here get quite confusing, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union is a complicated topic, so believe me, this is oversimplified, but it went a little bit like this. The Soviet Union was made up of a number of smaller Soviet republics, the largest of which
Including
was
Ukraine.
Russia. Yeltsin got himself elected the president of Russia, and began a struggle for sovereignty against Gorbachev and the greater Soviet Union. Communist hardliners were horrified at what Gorbachev was allowing, so they briefly kidnapped him and tried to set up their own emergency government. But Yeltsin and his supporters all gathered around the White House in Moscow and were like, no, we have a tank. So the hardliners had to concede and released Gorbachev. Wow, thanks Boris. That was a close one. No problem. And thanks to you for all the great freedom you've given us. Anytime, pal. And just to inform you, I've used that freedom you've given us to go behind your back and make a deal with Ukraine and Belarus to dissolve the Soviet Union and set up the Russian Federation. In other words, you're no longer in charge. I am. Dude. So uncool. And so decades of tension and the everlasting threat of nuclear war finally came to an end as democratic governments were established in many of the old Soviet republics, and the world got along together forever after. Right, guys?
No.
Hey, this modern art thing is growing on me. Where can I learn to do that? Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community.
Oh God. So yeah. Again, dude. The Cold War, man. What a friggin' trip. I still, to this day, cannot believe that actually happened and ended within my lifetime. I mean, I was born in '88, and then 1 year into my birth, or 1 year after my birth, the Berlin Wall fell. I mean, I think about that, and it still blows me away. I remember my dad saying that, you know, he was glad that I was born when I was born, so that way I would grow up in a time where, you know, freedom would be something that I would always have. And I didn't understand that when I was younger, but now that I'm older, I get it. I understand why my dad was happy that I was born and was, you know, and was more than proud to bring me up the way that he did. So yeah, God, dude. Again, oversimplified, always just knocking it out of the park. I'm always down to watch oversimplified. I'm always down to you know, enjoy history and, you know, talk about history. As long as y'all don't mind me talking about it, because that's just how I roll, guys. I can't help it. But anyway, I think that's gonna do it. This was Oversimplified Cold War Part 1 and 2. So if you want to see more from Oversimplified, click their name in the title of the video. And if you want to see more from me and more from us here at Renegade Media Group, feel free to click that subscribe button and feel free to ring that bell to stay notified. And I guess until next time, everyone, signing off, I'm Nate. I'll see you then. Peace out.